Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition. We just saw you all like 20 minutes ago in our mailbag podcast, but we are back with a special edition recruiting podcast. And Notre Dame fans, Notre Dame has picked up a big commitment today from Arizona standout Elijah Paige, a 2023 offensive tackle committed to Notre Dame today. And we thought, what better way to talk about Elijah Paige commitment than to bring on Elijah Paige. And so therefore, Elijah Paige is now with us joining our show. Elijah, congratulations, man. You're now a member of the number one ranked 2023 Notre Dame Fighting Irish recruiting class.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited to be a part of this class. It's a special class.
Well, I don't know if a week ago I would have said, oh, yeah, definitely Elijah Paige a week from now is going to be a member of the Notre Dame recruiting class. So let's just kind of dive right in because you came into the month of June. You had the Notre Dame visit. You had a USC visit scheduled. I think you were planning on getting to like Michigan State. I think that Washington was also trying to get you on campus. So where did things like when you kind of went into the visit, were you expecting to say, hey, week from now I'm going to be committed to Notre Dame? Can you just kind of walk us through what that process was like over that weekend that kind of made you say, hey, look, I'm done with this thing. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. So, you're right. A week ago, I wouldn't have thought that. I was pretty set on taking all my visits, all my official visits, and making a decision after that. But after getting on campus and just being around Coach Freeman, Coach Easton, and everybody, I knew it was the right place. And there's no reason to drag something out and take all my visits if I know where I'm going to go.
When did it happen? Like, kind of talk us through, like, you kind of give us a big picture thing. Was there a moment where you're like, okay, this is the move? How did it just kind of grow to that? What was that moment like for you? Did it happen during the visit? Was it after the visit where it just hit you like, okay, this is the move for me?
Yeah. So on my visit, I kind of had a feeling. I was talking to my family about it, and I kind of knew this was the place for me. And then when I got back Monday morning, I had breakfast with my family, and we talked about it, and they were all in, just like I'm all in. And I gave Coach Freeman and Coach Easton a call and told them that I'm coming and I'm excited.
What was their reaction?
They were hyped.
Okay.
I don't think they expected it because leaving on Sunday morning, I told Coach Freeman that I'm going to take all my visits and make a decision after that. So he was definitely surprised and he was happy. And Coach Reese was in the room too, and he was fired up.
I love it. Former Notre Dame player Jarrett Grace with the congratulations for you on the on that one. Ryan, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, Elijah, fortunately we were able to kind of exchange some texts after your visit, just kind of checking in on everything. I know one thing that you said to me that I was not surprised about because I saw your film and I thought you were a really well-coached player for your age, especially. But you talked a lot about your ability to sit down with Coach Easton and watch some film. Can you kind of take us through the developing relationship with Coach Easton and how much that coaching factor meant for you?
Yeah, it's a big factor. It was a huge factor in my recruitment to Notre Dame. I mean, you see the guys that he's produced. You see the history of him coaching, especially at Notre Dame. Guys like Quentin Nelson, Zach Martin, Liam Eichenberg. It's crazy. Ronnie Stanley, and so it's crazy what he can do and what he's capable of. And so he played a big role in my recruitment and just on my visit, sitting down and talking ball with him. We were breaking down my film, breaking down past film when he was here last. And it's crazy the terminology that he uses. And he's a super knowledgeable coach. There's a reason he's the best offensive line coach in the country. And you can tell just by talking to him.
My other main takeaway, Elijah, when we were able to speak was you talked a lot of, I asked you straight up, I was like, Arizona to South Bend's a far distance, right?
Yep.
How comfortable were you maybe before the visit with traveling that far? And was it a feeling that when you went on campus that solidified that you can go far away, or was that ever a factor in this recruitment?
Yeah, it wasn't really a huge factor. I knew that at some point in my life, I'm going to have to move away from home. And I mean, I wasn't too worried about it, but now, especially that I have taken a visit, when I got on campus, it kind of felt like home. Like I don't feel that far from home. It feels great there. And I'm not worried about that at all. The visit definitely changed my mind though. Like I have no worries at all.
Let me ask you this, Elijah. You talked about working with Coach Easton and like film and things like that. You have a unique connection to Notre Dame in that someone from your high school who you know, Tosh Baker, is an offensive lineman at Notre Dame. So coaches can tell you all they want about what they're going to do. When you get there, you actually have someone who can tell you if sort of the inside scoop, because he's played for Coach Easton. What were your conversations like? And I know, they won't throw, you got to make your decision, but what were your conversations like with Tosh when it comes to, just what it's like playing for Coach Easton and being at Notre Dame?
Yeah. I really like talking to Tosh because I know that he's being real with me. He's telling me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And that's always something you want in your recruitment. Everyone's going to tell you how good you are and what you can do for their program and what they're going to do with you. But no one's going to tell you the stuff that you don't always want to hear. And I think Tosh is definitely always going to be honest with me. And I really appreciate that out of him. And so he told me a lot. He told me that Coach Easton is a great coach. And he just in the little bit of him being there with spring ball and all that, he's learned so much. And yeah.
So you got the seal of approval from Tosh in regards to what it's really like being a lineman at Notre Dame. So that's a good thing. Elijah, I remember when you and I first talked, kind of Notre Dame had given you the offer and we reached out and I said, what's the conversation? And I was surprised that obviously Coach Easton reached out to you, but you said that you also hear a lot from Coach Freeman.
Yes.
What has your relationship, been like as far as with Coach Freeman? What are your thoughts on Coach Freeman and the program? Because you're obviously committing to the program he's building. Right.
Yeah.
So what's your relationship been like that? And what was it about Coach Freeman that made you say you wanted to be a part of this program?
Yeah. So with Coach Freeman, we have a really good relationship. We talk probably once a week, if not more than that. We text back and forth all the time. And getting on campus, it made our relationship even stronger. Talking to someone in person is definitely different than over the phone and texting somebody. So that's great. And I can't wait to play for Coach Freeman. His style of coaching is great. He's always has great energy, and you can tell just by talking to the current players how much they really, really do like Coach Freeman.
When you look at your recruitment, obviously, Elijah, you didn't plan on this happening this soon. Like you said, going into the visit, you thought the month of June was going to be filled with a lot of other visits. You got an offer later. Obviously, Coach Easton came on, and it took him some time to kind of scour the nation and find some guys that didn't already have offers that he liked. Eventually got to you and threw the offer out. And immediately we heard that Notre Dame liked you a lot. But so you were able to build your relationship with Coach Easton and Coach Freeman. I imagine you've talked sometimes with Coach Reese as well. Have you had much of a chance to develop much of a relationship with the other members of the 2023 recruiting class up to this point in time?
I've talked to Sullivan Absher. I talked to Sam Pendleton, Joe Otting a little bit. And we just text back and forth a little bit, but I haven't really gotten that chance to talk to all of them because I don't think any of us really expected this. I definitely didn't until I came home for my visit. But I'm definitely looking forward to building that relationship with them. I know they just added me to a group chat right before I came on here, and we were texting a little bit, and we're all excited, and I'm getting to know them a little bit.
Well, I think that's good because it means that you made the decision for you, and now you can build those relationships as opposed to maybe some outside influences. So I think that's a good thing. So let's get down to the nitty gritty, Elijah Paige. Okay, so when Notre Dame fans pop on the film and they're starting to evaluate offensive line play, when they watch Elijah Paige, what kind of player are we going to see?
Yeah. Definitely not a nice guy on the field. I take a great pride in not being a nice guy on the field. Off the field, I'm a really nice guy, really easy to talk to. But on the field, I'm just kind of go ahead and get it done. Old school kind of lineman. That's kind of my
And as
best
we
answer.
talked about before, length and athleticism, no doubt about it. So Elijah, again, I want to focus on this again. Your whole thing changed, right? Like you really thought June was going to look like one thing, and it's going to turn out to be something different. Yeah. You told us before that you're done with it. You're not going to take those other visits. So what's next for you? Does it mean you and your family kind of get the rest of June off? You get to relax a little bit, save some time and money? Is it allow you to kind of start focusing on your team at Pinnacle? Were you always planning to at least decide before your senior season? Was that going to be the plan, or was this super even sped up even more?
Yeah, so we definitely didn't expect this. I was supposed to be in East Lansing right now, taking my visit to Michigan State, and then after that, USC, and then Washington. And but I feel right. I feel great about this decision, and I know I made the right decision committing to Notre Dame. So yeah, this June wasn't what it was supposed to be crazy, and we were supposed to be all over the country, but we're glad we're not, and we're glad we're settled and part of the Irish family.
And now you get to kind of focus in on continuing to develop, and now you get to focus on your high school team a little bit, right? I
Yep.
imagine there's going to be some workouts coming up here in the next few weeks that you guys get started with that you're going to be able to continue to grow. So let's kind of, again, we appreciate your time. I know you want to go celebrate with your family. Just if there's anything else you'd like to, you got a lot of congratulations, a lot of people excited about you, Notre Dame fit and all that kind of stuff, which we love to hear. What would you like to say on your way out of here as you go celebrate with your family to Notre Dame Nation?
Yeah, I don't got much to say, but just Notre Dame fans, you guys are getting someone who's going to work hard and not stop until it's done, and do anything I can and anything I can to help Notre Dame win. That's my goal, and coming to Notre Dame is to help Notre Dame win.
Love it. Love it. And there's a lot of people jealous of the hair, Elijah. I'm just going to let you know. A lot of people wishing they could grow that out.
Ryan, I was going to say, I think that you have supplanted Sullivan Absher as the best hair of all the offensive line.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like there's so many, like, you've got like Joe Otting's got like the red hair that just, and then, Sam Pendleton's got like the buzz cut, like the military cut, and then Sullivan's got the big hair, and then Elijah's got, so all types of different things, man. There's no doubt. So love it. Love. Thanks so much, Elijah, for joining us. We really appreciate you, and congratulations. And I know a lot of Notre Dame fans are very excited to have you on board and looking forward to seeing how you develop over the next year and following your senior season.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for having me on here.
Take care,
Thanks, Elijah.
So that's Elijah Paige, everybody. Notre Dame's latest commitment, Ryan. This is a really talented player. He told us, so we were talking to him before the show. He had told me when I first talked to him, he said, he played the year at like 6'6", 6'5". He said he was about 6'5" and a half. Mm-hmm. He's about 282 pounds is what he played his junior year at, which is about kind of what we said. Because remember, he was listed at 295. And when we broke his film down, we're like, he doesn't look 295. And he's like, I was like 282, but then I saw a photo of him, a couple photos from him from his visit. I'm like, this kid's filled out. So we asked him, I said, because Notre Dame measures kids when they come on official visits. That's one of the things they do. They're allowed to do that. Said he measured in at 6'6" 3/4. So he's grown over an inch. And he measured in at over 300 pounds with 34.5-inch arms, which is elite size. And if you look at him, it's not bad weight. It's good. He's hit a growth spurt, and he's filled out really, really well, but really impressive kid. And you see it too, not just an impressive kid on film, but this is a really engaging, confident young man that I think Notre Dame fans are going to like a lot, right? But the interesting thing is he said very clearly, I had no intention of coming into this visit of committing to Notre Dame. And it sounds like he didn't necessarily have an intention of when he left Notre Dame of necessarily committing, but just that trip home allowed him to say, you know what, where else would I rather be?
Yeah. I mean, and you love to hear that stuff, right? I mean, because we were talking beforehand and we're like, are you going to take any more visits? And he's just like, nope, I'm all in. I'm done. Right. So it's really nice to hear, man. And it's really nice to see because he's a player that we have obviously liked for a while now. And for him to get bought in so quickly, and you could just tell, I mean, I think someone said it in the chat. He opens his mouth and you're like, yep, that's a Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Like it's very easy to hear. So feel really great for Elijah, for his family. And I think Notre Dame's getting a great addition with this one.
So let's kind of talk practically, Ryan, too. I think this is a big commitment for a couple reasons. Okay. Obviously we'll get into how it impacts the class, but there's two sort of broader things that I want to just mention first. Number one, getting into Arizona is so important. You've now signed a kid from Arizona two years in a row. He said he was talking about how he played against Benjamin Morrison. He said, when we asked about Benjamin, what did he say? He's special. All right. And then obviously you got Tosh Baker in 2020. So you've now landed an Arizona kid in 3 of your last 4 classes. And as we've talked about in the show before, Arizona is an ascending state when it comes to producing big time players. And now I don't think the recruiting rankings have figured that out yet, with the exception of, even Anthony Lucas last year was criminally underrated early in the process. It wasn't until Bama and everybody started getting on him that they raised his rankings up.
Right.
So, but you're seeing that. So that's important because the more kids you get from there, the easier it is to get the next kid from there, right? This is a kid that Elijah Rushing, for example, in the 24 class has played against. He knows what kind of player that Notre Dame is getting. So that aspect is good. But here's the other thing. USC wanted Elijah Paige bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they wanted him bad, Ryan. And so we've talked a lot about this. When you can get a talented player, that's important. But when you can get a talented player and then you beat a team you compete against for him, that's sort of the double bonus towards. And this isn't talking trash. This is just practically speaking. It's an important thing to do, to not only get talented players, but you also have kept one from a team you're trying to compete against. That's how you close the gap or further the gap or whatever the case may be, depending on who you're talking about. So I think that was a really important part of that, of his commitment as well.
Yeah, no, for a pipeline to start, it's got to start somewhere, right? And it started over the last couple, like you said, with Benjamin Morrison. You talked about Tosh Baker, of course, in a couple classes ago. So Notre Dame is starting to tap back in Arizona. It has become a much wealthier state in terms of recruiting talent that it keeps getting out. And this is another instance, Brian, and I know we talk about this all the time, but the fact that Elijah Paige is considered a 3-star by most platforms is criminal. It's absolutely criminal. He is some of the better film that I've seen of the 2023 offensive linemen. So getting into Arizona and getting a really good football player, it absolutely matters.
And we'll dive into the film too, but the one thing that was the concern for me, he's got to fill out the frame and the strength and the power. Those things are sort of already happening a little bit sooner than expected, which is a positive. So let's talk about this class impact, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at how landing Elijah Paige impacts Notre Dame's 2023 recruiting class, here's another reason that this is a very important pickup. And that is, there were 2 needs that Notre Dame had to address in this line class. They needed a center, which we talked about in the Joe Otting interview. But even more importantly, because I think center is a little easier to find than pure tackles, right? Like you can fit some. I mean, Jarrett Patterson was a pure tackle that could go play center. You need guys who can play tackle. And like Sullivan Absher a lot, we both like him, but we're not sold that he's a pure tackle. He may end up, maybe he could play right tackle, but he's, could also move inside. Sam Pendleton's an inside player. He's going to be an inside player. He plays tackle in high school. He's going to move inside. Joe Otting was recruited to play inside. He plays inside in high school. This is a pure tackle. It could play left tackle right now. Obviously, if you have 2 good left tackles and you can start them both, and you have 2 great pass blockers, that's obviously something that Tom Reese is going to like. Mm-hmm. And so, but he's a kid that for sure can play left tackle, and he's a pure tackle. So I don't want to focus so much on the right left, but this is a pure tackle and a kid that I do think gives you a chance to have someone who can play left tackle, which is something this class needs. Now, if you can get 2 guys like that, that'd be better.
Yep.
But you needed a pure tackle, and he's the first pure tackle that they've signed in this class, as it gets them now to 4 commits as he joins Sullivan Absher, Sam Pendleton, and Joe Otting.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's paramount because, like you said, we're not focusing too much of the right tackle versus left tackle. But even if Notre Dame's able to land a Charles Jagasaw, let's say, and that ends up being the last lineman, just in a hypothetical, we're not counting Monroe Freeling for a second, then there's only one player of that group that I am convinced that can play left tackle, and that is Elijah Paige. So he has really good athleticism, which we're going to jump into the film on, I know, here in a few minutes. He's got really good length. Those 2 things, when you have foot quickness and length and good body control, you can talk about left tackle. And I think that's what Elijah brings to the table. So he is a clear need. The only player that Notre Dame has landed so far in this offensive line group that I am convinced can stick at offensive tackle long-term for sure. So it's a massive, massive need from a position perspective for Notre Dame.
So when we talk about the class impact as well, that does get them to 4. We will dive more in. I know some people are going to ask about what's next. We will get to that. We'll get to that after we do the film room. But I think the fact that you've met your tackle need, you've been able to dip into a state that I know Notre Dame wants to have more success in, I think are all things that are positives in this commitment. So certainly an impact. And I think now it allows Notre Dame to say, okay, we've got our 4, because 4 was the minimum number that Notre Dame needed to land in this class. Certain things have gone on that they want to jump to 5. Partly of what's going on is just a really talented class in their view, and they want to tap into it. But it allows them to now say, okay, we've met our minimum need. Now it's just about how many more impact players do we want to bring in? Charles Jagasaw, Monroe Freeling, other guys. Let's continue recruiting impact players and see how it goes. So we'll dive into the specific numbers, but you certainly have now met your minimum need. And 3 of the 4 are ranked as 4-star recruits by at least 1 service. 3 of the 4 are ranked as top 250 players by at least 1 service. Because because Elijah Paige, the one site that is starting to kind of give him the respect that I think his game should determine, especially if you're going to look at the upside, which we do, 247 has jumped him up to number 223 overall. I have him graded out as a top 200 player, and the current grade with a 5-star upside is where I have him, Ryan. So I think that you now have, it's a quality class. Now it's about put the icing on the cake with an elite player, another elite upside guy in a Charles Jagusah or Monroe Freeling, which we'll get into here in a little bit.
Yep.
So Ryan, let's dive into the film room.
Let's do it.
Of Elijah Paige. So let me just get this going here. So we're gonna jump in here a little bit. Let's get that up on the screen, Ryan, and we are going to check him out. He is the left tackle, number 71 for Pinnacle High School, which, as we said, is the high school of Tosh Baker. The thing that we liked about him when we watched him last time, Ryan, was he's not incredibly strong yet, but he's got the motor. He plays hard. He's got an edge to him. And like you said, he's not a nice guy on the field. There's the athleticism that we talked about.
Well, I mean, you can see the athleticism in the first two plays. The first one, he's working up to the second level. This one, they have him pulling around on the lead. I mean, he's just a smooth athlete. There's some offensive tackles or just offensive linemen in general, where you see them pull, and it's just the word that comes to mind is lumbering. That is not a word that you think of when you see Elijah Paige. He's a very smooth mover.
This is against Elijah Rushing, who's a 5-star defensive end in the 2024 class that Notre Dame likes a lot. You see the length. Again, I think he gets a little too high here. We talked about this, but you see the quickness and the athleticism to compete, and he ends up putting him on the ground.
See that inside hand, man. That's really nice stuff.
Well, that's the one thing
about the coaching.
Yes, talk about that, Ryan, because, I mean, we discussed this last time, but he's an incredibly well-coached young man.
Yeah, so on the sprint out, obviously, he was going against a kid like Elijah Rushing, who's a really good football player in his own right. So he has that strong inside hand. When he's working against that leverage, he's able to uncork his hips and really force his power outside, because at that point, he's just like, I'm going to take you wherever your momentum's going, but I'm going to finish you on the ground. So that play for me on that sprint out was about good hand position, and he has really strong hips. You can see it, that there's some strength through his core that's developing.
Speaking of sound technique, this is an example of a guy that's coached well, but also is an instinctive player. There's two things that I like about this. Number one, he knows he's working with help here, right? So essentially what's going on is when you look at this left tackle here and this tight end here, they're working a combo for these two players. So if the defensive end shoots inside, then Elijah takes them, right? And then the tight end would take the linebacker. And if they do some kind of stunt, which comes here, Elijah's going to pass it off and then pick up the stunter. And that's exactly what happens, Ryan. And it's but look at him, how he keeps his shoulder square, right? Doesn't turn into the end, keeps his shoulder square, engages, feels the outside to help secure that C gap, but then keeps his eyes up and then picks up the stunting linebacker with relative ease.
Yeah,
that's
good awareness.
Yes.
Good awareness.
Yes. You can see the bend, right? You just, even in a stance, you can see that the kid can bend at the knees. Is huge. You're going to hear that waist bender, knee bender. He can definitely bend. Sometimes his technique gets to the point where he'll lunge a little bit, but that's a technique thing that can be corrected. The athletics talent to be a bender is there, and that's important.
And one thing that we want you to notice, especially
look at his eyes. Look at his eyes. You can see him looking, okay, they're running a stunt where I got, bam, pick it up. Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, especially because you're going to see a lot of pass blocking reps for Elijah. And the one thing that I love about him is that he always just seems so patient. And when you're patient like that, you're well coached, of course, but you have to have a lot of trust in your athleticism and your length. And we mentioned 34.5-inch arms, and this type of athlete, the patience for a kid his age is really, really impressive.
Watch this dip and rip right here. When he gets to the second level, right there, bam, right? That's really good. He's got to get low on a little linebacker, and he's able to do it. Look, he wins the leverage battle against a guy that looks to be about 6 feet tall. Opens that hole up, cutback lane right up.
You can see the
pad
hip
level
explosion.
there is excellent. Yeah,
Yep.
the hip, yes, exactly. The hip explosion as well.
Fine work.
Yep. One of the most annoying things I ever see is when you see a lineman that just nobody's coming, so I'm just gonna
stand there.
Yep, pretty much. He does a good job of driving his feet. This is a play where he actually his upper body gets a little bit too far ahead of his lower body, right? But he recovers. He keeps working his feet, and he ends up winning. Obviously, in college, that he'll have to improve that, right? But you don't see that a ton. But the thing is, I love the compete level of this rep, right? Like the technique on this rep is not great, but I love the compete level, and obviously you see the strength. But that's the thing for me is when you play for Harry Easton, you're going to be more fundamentally sound, even more so than he is already. But the compete level's got to be there, and that's what you see from Elijah Paige.
I also love that kind of rep too, Brian, because when he's off balance there for a second, right? You're lunging
This
and you're
rep right
off
here, right?
Yeah,
Right.
he's lunging, he's off balance, but the fact that he's able to maintain his balance, that tells me that he's a flexible athlete, right? Like most guys, their chest gets too far over their knees and they're going to face plant on the ground. That guy's just going to rip right past you. There, you can see his body recover, which tells me that he's a very flexible athlete as well.
Yeah. And you meet him, he's this really nice kid and engaging, and then you watch him play, and you're like, this kid's got some attitude. And everybody talks about, the impact that Harry Easton is going to have. I can't wait to watch this. And of course, that's true, but I can't wait to watch this kid after a year of being with Matt Balis. That's what I'm looking forward to. Because he's got a really impressive frame, Ryan. You can see it right there, like really long arms. Drives his feet. They narrow up at the end, but that's kind of going to happen when you're driving a guy that far off the ball.
Yep. Yeah, and you're going to get, I mean, we've talked about this though, right? Like he needs to continue to develop his power. Right. So when your power isn't great, you're going to get narrow at times. It's going to
But for a guy that doesn't have like that elite Charles Jagasol power, puts a lot of dudes on the ground.
Sure
I mean, he really but that's he's got some natural ability there, definitely. But it's also he, like you said, the hips and the feet. He never stops working his feet. And it's also a mentality thing. He wants to bury you. He wants to put you on the ground and then, like you just did there, crawl over you to let you, I mean, that's kind of what you want to see. I mean, he's got a great motor. Once the strength, the weight room strength gets added, this kid's going to be really, really impressive. And this is why we say, maybe he's not a top 100 guy right now, right? Because he's, still filling out the frame. Although if he is 304 pounds, he could end up being a top 100 guy after his senior year film comes out. But just based off his junior film, he's not a top 100 guy yet. But the upside is as high as anybody in the class outside of maybe Monroe Freeling, right? Like that's probably still my number one upside guy. But he's got a 5-star upside grade to me.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I'm a little
I know that he plays. You were talking about, Ryan.
Yeah, I know. And I know he plays basketball, which, the foot quickness should be no big surprise there. But I'm a little surprised that he's not a wrestler because his hips are just so strong. You can just kind of see the hip flexibility and power through it.
He's going to be a good zone blocker. That's for sure. The quickness, the athleticism, the understanding of, hey, I'm feeling this, not necessarily turning into this. He's going to make a really quick transition into the zone concepts.
Oh yeah. This is an outside zone preferred kid who can run inside zone as well. Like movement based. Absolutely.
Now, one thing I do want to see him continue to improve on is using his hands more as a weapon. He does not really do that a ton. This is an example. There's others. He doesn't really use his hands to strike. When he does, it's when he's on the second level, and he'll do it more then. But at the line of scrimmage, I would like to see him use his hands a little bit more to strike with.
He's got the snatch trap in his repertoire already, though.
Yeah, there's a good one. See that? Like there, he shoots his hands a little bit, and you can see that kid rock back a little bit.
You can see the length there too. That kid's like, please stop.
Why are you doing this? Keeps working the feet, keeps working the feet, keeps working the feet. And this is good awareness. We kind of saw this on one of Sullivan Absher's films, but he's stepping out. Guy slants across his face. He gets there, but still has that feel to get outside. He keeps his eye. He does a really nice job of keeping he's got really good field awareness of not just the guy that I'm working on right now, but just kind of everything around you. You need to have that. College football for linemen is not just I'm blocking this dude, right? I mean, it's just that's not the game. It's I might block this dude, but if they do this, I got to block that guy. I may block this guy initially, but then I'm going to end up having to block that guy. That's big boy football, right? And he's got really good field awareness. That's a kid who has a mental understanding of the game as well as of the physical tools, right? And that's not always. This is something that you mentioned the other day, Ryan. Like in high school, you can just be a big, strong, athletic guy and dominate as an offensive lineman.
Mhm.
In college and the NFL, it is a thinking man's position, and that's why we focus on the kid's fundamentals, but also his feel for the game it's got to be there. This is really
Yep.
good quickness right here. Like he gets around this kid in a hurry.
And I know he kind of talked a little bit when we had him on, Brian, about that he just felt it when he was on campus. It really, from when I talked to him after the visit, it really seemed like the big thing that he talked about was being able to watch film with Coach Easton. Like that was a big moment
Mhm.
for him. So he does really seem like a very studious player. Like he just seems
Mhm.
like he understands angles, he understands field awareness. Like those things
Mhm.
seem to become. It's not a natural thing, so that tells me you have to study it.
We didn't talk to him about him going up to Deuce Robinson and be like, "Hey, man, why don't you come join me in South Bend?"
Right, right.
Really good patience. This is another clip of that. Like I don't know what this edge rusher's doing, but Elijah doesn't panic. He's like, "Okay, is there somebody else coming inside?" You see that like little quick peek inside. Like, nope, this guy just doesn't want to engage me. But he stays patient, right? And then finally gets on the guy. And now that would explain why the guy didn't want any piece of him, right? It's like, well, it's kind of what happens when I come at you. Really nice job working his feet.
I really like when he either down blocks or works the second level. So you see him, he gets his hips aligned into, where his butt's into the hole. That's like a very, again, that's like an understanding of where the ball's going.
Here's another twist that he picks up really effectively. And we talked about this the first time we watched the film. I remember this exact play. But both of these kids picked this up really well. It just goes back to I don't know who this coach is, but this is he's going to show up with an understanding of how to play. Now Harry Heastand, like in high school, he's taking O-line play 101, which is good because most high school kids don't even get that. He's
Mhm.
going to have a sound foundation for them to build on. There's no question about it. He's been prepped well. Now it's about Matt Bayless and Harry Heastand taking it to another level. Ooh, don't throw that ball.
And this is a play where you can see the length because this defensive end actually gets into his chest early on in the rep,
Mhm.
but then you see that he can recover and then he gets the lockout. That's where you kind of see that where that length really comes into help.
There's some athleticism there.
Really quick out of his stance too.
Mhm.
Good lateral ability.
So when people hear us talk about lateral agility or lateral quickness, this is what we're talking about, moving laterally. And he does it with ease. It's not an effort, guys, and getting around again. Talented kid.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Brian, I'm going to make it like a slightly hot take, but I really, and I think you already mentioned something about it, but like, I wouldn't be surprised if this kid's a top 100 high 4-star type of kid when it's all said and done, because if he is 6'6 3/4, 304 pounds, like he told us with 34.5-inch arms, and he's
Mhm.
this well coached with this good of foot quickness, I don't think this is a high upside, low floor type of prospect. Like that's a high floor for me
Right.
and also a high
Right.
upside kid. So I don't really see what's holding him back too much from a talent
Right.
perspective.
We
He's
got to
got it
see it on
all.
film, right? We got to
Sure,
see it on film. But yes, if
sure.
he has had the fill out that he's talked about, he's 6'5.5", 282 there. He's now 6'7", 304 is what he said. Uh, if that then translates to the athleticism is still there, and then those other things catch, then yeah, he's a kid that's going to jump up the rankings. There's no
100%.
question about it. So it's going to be interesting. So that's Elijah Paige's film, and you get a chance to see him, Ryan. Again, what are the things that you look for, right? So I don't know how Ryan is, but when I watch film, when I'm about to pop an alignment, I have a form that I have that these are the things for this position I'm looking for, right? I mean, for an offensive tackle, it's length, right? And I'm not talking about height. I don't care. The 6'7" thing doesn't matter. He could be 6'3", but with 34.5-inch arms, he can play tackle, right? That's the key. But then you combine the height and the length. You see it. You've got the height. You've got the length. You've got the frame. You've got foot quickness. You've got agility. Those are not always the same thing. And here's the difference. Foot quickness can simply be wrapped up into, like Ryan talked about, the lateral quick. I can go in one direction and go really quickly. Agility for me is more of the ability to then change direction effectively. Those are two different things. It's kind of like being fast in a 40, but not then being able to do anything side to side, right? Those both are required. So you see the foot quickness, the agility, right? And you mentioned the balance is very impressive. Those are all things that you look for. He's got a little punch in his hands, and that's what I'm looking forward to seeing, kind of him taking that next step is with the punch, the power, using his hands a little bit more effectively. High football IQ. Can he change direction with ease? And just like I said, those are the things you look for. What's the upside? Can he improve in these different areas? And everything he's good on a lot of positions, but there's room for improvement everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I think those are the things you look for as a coach is you don't want a guy that's going to just, okay, this is as good as he's going to get. This kid's got a lot of room for development, and he's already a pretty good player. So those are things that you like to see. Like there's like, if you go watch Elijah Rushing's highlights, there's a couple plays where Elijah Paige will kind of stop moving his feet a little bit, right? Those things are going to happen. And when you watch game film, there's a couple game films on YouTube. You'll see just a couple times like, okay, just keep working your feet. Those things are all part of it. But that's what you expect from a high school junior. And that's what Harry Heastand is there for. But the tools are there. I mean, he's a really, really he's a really, really a good football player and a guy that I think this is a good pickup. Again, if you're someone who looks at the stars and the recruiting rankings, it's kind of what we told you last time. You're not going to love this kid, but if you're an offensive line coach, you're going to love this kid. Mm-hmm. And obviously Notre Dame did. I mean, knowing that they're the leader for Monroe Freeling, we believe, and definitely the leader for Charles Jagasaw, and you still took this kid, says everything you need to know about this. And I'm going to tell you right now, I've talked to some sources at Notre Dame going into the visit. This kid was a must-get for them. In their view, he was a must-get player. So really important pickup for Notre Dame and solidifies the line class. There's now one guy for sure that has a very high ceiling in this class, like 5-star ceiling. I don't have Absher as a 5-star upside guy. I don't have Pendleton there either. Otting I don't have quite there. This is the first 5-star upside guy. Now, Absher's 4.5-star because there's a lot of things to like. Yep. But I also like the fact that if Paige and Absher are your tackles down the road, you do really kind of have that ideal left-right duo. You know, the left tackle is the athletic, the pass pro, the right tackle, Absher, is the big, powerful mover kind of guy, right? So you have that balance. And then, of course, if Notre Dame's able to either get Monroe Freeling or Charles Jagasaw, then, you know, one of Jagasaw or Absher could then move inside, and you still have that unique combination. And then if you get in a situation where we'll get into a little bit, if you're able to get Freeling and Paige, then you've got two elite athletes on the edge at tackle.
Yep.
And that's a big thing. So that is what we see from Elijah Paige. Mm-hmm. So Ryan, let's dive into sort of what's next.
Sure.
We talked before at the beginning of the show about they needed a pure tackle. They got it. So check there, at least one. I still think they need 2 pure tackles. That's just my opinion. That could be done by 2 ways. One is to get Monroe Freeling. The other is to get 2 guys that are sort of maybe right tackle guard type guys, and one of them will stick. That's Jagasaw and Absher. That's the other way to get to it. Mm-hmm. I would still like to see a second pure tackle. Obviously, the number 1 tackle left on the board is on campus right now. That's Monroe Freeling. He's on campus right now for his official visit. Hopefully his official visit goes as well as Elijah Paige's official visit goes, and he comes to the same decision. And then, of course, Charles Jagasaw will be on campus sometime next week for his final visit. And that's really it. I mean, you've got Paige in the class now, Sullivan Absher in the class now, Sam Pendleton in the class now, and Joe Otting in the class now. So that's your 4. You've met your minimum need. And now Notre Dame has to make a decision whether they're going to go to 5 or go to 6. And I think that's the question, Ryan. And so there's a lot they got to figure out. Now, part of this for Notre Dame was you take Paige now. They think they're going to be able to get Jagasaw soon. Freeling has been adamant to you, to them, to everybody that he wants to take this commitment into the summer, into the fall, right? So I think this is where it is like you take these kids that want to be here and then you keep recruiting Monroe Freeling. I believe that's what's going to happen. And so I think that's where Notre Dame is at, where they're going to try to get one more guy this summer for sure. Mm-hmm. From what I've talked to, I think that 6 is going to be tough, but I think they're willing to make it work simply because the 2 guys left on the board are just too good to pass up in Charles Jagasaw and Monroe Freeling. So I think that's where they're at. Ryan, I've talked about this. I hate taking 6 linemen into class. This is the exception. I do want to get your thoughts on number one. Would you take 6 in this class if it meant Jagasol and Freeling? Because I'm not taking 6 to take, Austin Saraveld or somebody like that. It's if you can get one of those 2 studs, then you do it. And then also, how would that group then fit together? So first part of the question, Ryan, is would you go to 6? And second part of the question is, how do you see that group of 6 kind of filling out?
Yeah. I mean, the answer is yes. And I would even sacrifice maybe a couple spots in the 2024 group, because right now it's a very small board in 2024. There's only 4 kids that are committed. 4 kids that are offered in the 2024 class. And just early on, and we're talking 2 years out, I think 2023 looks like they might have a little more talent, right? So I think that this is the year that you push it to 6. We talked about 5 being, the number that they are definitely probably going to get to if they're able to land Charles Jagasaw, obviously. But if Monroe Freeling's there and he wants to come to Notre Dame, you have to take him, in my opinion. Not saying that's Notre Dame's opinion, but in my opinion, I would absolutely take 6. And at that point, you're looking at it and you're saying in a 6-man class, clear projection, Joe Otting is your true center. You have guards that are Sam Pendleton, and it's either going to be Charles Jagasaw or Sullivan Absher long-term. We'll see. And then, like you said before, Elijah Paige and Monroe Freeling are your 2 offensive tackles. So you have a complete offensive line across, and then one guy that I think is the swing player, right? That maybe can play a little bit guard, play inside a tackle. But I think that is if you get to that 6, man, that's hard to argue that there's a better 6-man. I mean, well, there probably is not going to be another 6-man class, but it's hard.
I hope not.
Argue.
Yeah, I hope they're never in a position where they have to consider taking 6 again. Yeah,
I was talking about big picture nation.
Gotcha.
The 2023 class.
Texas took like what 7 last year.
Is that what they
took?
did
that
7?
out of need. Like they had to do that. I think they had like 7 or 8 guys last year. But that's the thing, is Notre Dame is not in a position where they need to do that. They would simply be about talent acquisition. We can't not take that group. And again, I think the other part of it too that we have to discuss is, one of the caveats is, I do think there's an ability to create some separation in the 6-man class. Monroe Freeling is not a 5-year player. He's just not. I mean, so you're getting him in the rotation right away if he earns it, right? I mean, that's only if he earns it. You don't have to worry about redshirting him. I don't know if I would necessarily worry too much about redshirting Charles Jagasaw, to be completely honest with you. If Elijah Paige shows up at 6'7", 305, 310, which if he went from 282 to 304 in this offseason, he's going to be, 310. Hopefully it's, continues to be good weight in next offseason. He's also a guy you're probably not looking at as a 5-year player. Also, when you consider the fact that that's going to be potentially the final year for Fisher and or Joe Alt, it's even more reason to get some of these tackles sort of on the field in some way, somehow, and not be too worried about the redshirt aspect of it, which I think then creates some separation between certain guys. I think, Sullivan Absher, I think, needs a lot of development from the standpoint of transitioning from a triple option offense to a more traditional offense. But physically, I think Sullivan Absher's a guy that if you needed help could help you out as a freshman at guard or right tackle.
Agree.
So, and then of course, Joe Otting's a guy that's going to need time. I think Sam Pendleton's going to need some time. I wouldn't like to redshirt Sullivan Absher because of that schematic transition. The fundamental technical transition is going to be much starker for him than it is going to be for everybody else because he's coming from such a different offense. But the point is, I think you can kind of break it up to where you're not going to just redshirt everybody like you used to do with the offensive line. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's an important piece too. Because you remember, like the great class that had Quentin Nelson, Alex Barr, Sam Mustipher, and Jimmy Byrne, all those guys redshirted. Quentin Nelson redshirted. Mike McGlinchey redshirted. Ronnie Stanley kind of redshirted. They played him in a couple games, and then he had a medical thing. Liam Eichenberg redshirted, right? Yeah. Aaron Banks redshirted, Nick Martin redshirted, Zach Martin redshirted. Like, redshirting's not a bad thing. It's just that some of these kids are probably not 5-year guys. That there's more Blake Fisher, Joe Alt, what he turned out to be, type of guys in this class than there are guys that are like, boy, that kid's really talented, but he's going to need some time. I would have thrown Elijah Paige into that category a month ago.
Sure.
Until you saw the new picture, like, okay, that the thing that we were concerned about has kind of stepped up, because technically he's the kid that can make the fastest train. Him and Monroe Freeling have the smallest gap from they are fundamentally to where they need to be to play college football. They have the smallest gap to close of all the guys on the board. And so the fundamental part, the athletic part was there. Now, if the size and the strength catches up, then he's a kid that could play early, which I would not have said that when we first watched this film, because we hadn't seen how much he'd filled out this offseason.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. He's, for me, and I told Brian this before we started, he may be the most technically refined 2023 offensive tackle I've watched so far out of anybody I've watched, not just the guys that are committed to Notre Dame. Like Elijah Paige understands angles. He's incredibly balanced in pass pro. He's very patient in pass pro. So although the star ranking might say that this is a developmental kid and a kid that needs the long-term, if he is the same caliber of athlete with that length at 304 pounds right this second, he may be a guy that surprises and comes in and plays some football early on.
Ryan, we are going to have a Q&A here in a little bit, but I first wanted to, so if you have some questions about Elijah Paige, about O-line recruiting, about recruiting in general, whatever else, we will have a Q&A after this. But I wanted to first talk about sort of finishing up the what's next aspect of this, right? And just with a quick update on where things stand with Monroe Freeling and Charles Jagasaw. So as I said, Monroe Freeling is on campus this weekend. Charles Jagasaw, I believe, shows up next Sunday or Monday. Is it Sunday he's going to show up for his official? Is it Sunday or Monday?
I thought it was the 17th.
No, he's coming in town that weekend, but he's actually going to be a couple days later. I think he's actually not going to show up till Sunday.
I think it's the 19th. Whatever that day is. Yeah.
So, and then of course, Monroe Freeling's on campus. So let's just kind of go in chronological order of when they visit. Latest on Monroe Freeling school, because he's got some more visits coming up, just kind of where things stand. Obviously, anything can happen this weekend, but just kind of where things stand going in to this weekend's visit with Monroe Freeling, who Ryan and I will both say is the number one offensive tackle on our board. I'm correct? Am I safe in saying that? Okay, I thought I had that right.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about Samson Okololo a lot. That's not on the board anymore, but besides him, he was Monroe Freeling, I think, is the highest guy that I've had on this board. He's a really talented football player and true left tackle type at the next level. And he likes Notre Dame. Notre Dame really likes him. The question has just always been about what does the timeline look like? And all respect to Monroe on this, he's been incredibly consistent with the fact that he wants to take his visits into the fall. He wants to go on game visits. He wants to do his due diligence. All respect to him. He's not a kid that's gone back and forth with it. He has remained incredibly consistent that is what he wants to do. And that is the most recent update. We don't know exactly when it's going to pop. He told me personally that if it's right, I'll know it. And then that'll be the end of it. But he has still a full intention of going into the fall. So Notre Dame is going to maybe have to play the waiting game with him. I personally think that he's too good not to continue that relationship. I think that's what Notre Dame is going to do in that regard. That'll force them to make a decision on 5 or 6 ultimately. But it appears that as of now, Monroe Freeling is playing the waiting game. And I think he's too good not to keep tabs on.
I think if you're Notre Dame, you try to push for Monroe Freeling into this class. This weekend, you try to get him to commit like you did. They did not that you get him to commit, but hope that you can knock it out of the park enough to get him to commit. Kind of like Elijah Paige. They didn't pressure Elijah Paige to commit. The visit was so good that they realized where he wants to be. And hopefully that happens for Monroe Freeling. But I also feel like it's actually not a bad thing if that doesn't happen. Because they do have to look, they can't just take 6 right now and feel like, it'll be fine. I think they would. I think if Monroe Freeling committed this weekend, I don't think they're telling Charles Jagasaw no. I don't believe that would be the case. The point is you take 6, but you're like, we got to figure something out, right? Like if he does take it into the fall, I do think that gives them some time to see, okay, where might we come up short somewhere else? Where might something happen on our roster? Where might something happen with all types of situations where, okay, that's how we can make it work. But you keep recruiting them. And you have to keep recruiting them as hard as you have been. That's the key. You can't back off a kid and still say, well, we're still recruiting him. You need to continue recruiting him as you always have. And that, to me, is going to be the key with Monroe Freeling. And then we talked about Charles Jagasaw. I mean, we've all talked with Sean. Sean's talked to him. He's going to be on campus the 19th through the 20th, I believe, is those 2 days with his mom. That was the key, Ryan. With Charles Jagasol, the final piece was he's got to get mom on campus and make sure the mom gives him the thumbs up.
Yeah, I mean that pretty much sums it up perfectly. Notre Dame has been Charles Jagasol's #1 school for a while now, right? Like we talked about the Iowas of the world that have continued to obviously do a good job with
Michigan, Arkansas.
Michigan, kind of push those buttons to try to get Charles to swing in their favor. But it's been Notre Dame for a little bit as far as the clear leader. It's just always about when is it going to pop, and we still feel very confident that when it does pop, hopefully sometime in the near future, it's going to be in favor of Notre Dame. So not much has changed. It's just about when it's going to happen.
I mean, the only way they don't get him in the class is if they just decide not to take him.
Right.
I mean, that would be the only reason that I would say, oh, what would cause you not to get him? It just, you decide you're not going to let's say Monroe Freeling commits this weekend. They're like, we're good. That would be the only way I see Notre Dame not getting him, or somebody just really offends his mom next weekend, which I don't see that.
I'd be surprised. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the update on where guys are from a recruiting standpoint. So we will get into some questions here. You can ask questions about Elijah Paige, offensive line recruiting in general, team, whatever you would like to discuss. So let's dive into some questions, Ryan. We'll kick off with a super chat from Brandon Plensner. If Notre Dame lands Charles Jagasol, would they have a starting O-line group committed? Out of that group, who would you put at right tackle? Absher and Jagasol. So to answer the first part, Ryan, if Notre Dame lands Jagasol, would they then have basically a potential for a group of 5 that they can play together?
Yeah, absolutely. You would have, left to right in a projecting, you would have Elijah Paige at left tackle. You would have left guard would either be Sam Pendleton or a Sullivan Absher. Then you would have a center of Joe Otting. The right guard would be Sam Pendleton, and then the right tackle would be, in this scenario, a Charles Jagasol. So I guess I answered the second part of the question. In my opinion, is I would, if I had to choose between one being a tackle, one being a guard, I think that I like Sullivan Absher better inside, as far as I think Jagasol has higher upside to play tackle than Sullivan Absher does. So I would keep Jagasol at right tackle to begin in that scenario.
That's where I'm at. That's exactly the lineup that I would go with. I would even consider kind of thinking about the combo. I would actually probably move Sullivan Absher to left guard and go Sam Pendleton right guard. I'm not sure. I didn't hear you. I was reading questions.
I said Pendleton right guard. So
okay, so that's kind of me too. Like, so I would because I think Absher plays mostly right tackle now.
Yep.
I would move him to left guard. I think that just that long, big, athletic combination on the left side would be something I really like.
We're on the same Elijah Paige. Did you get it?
Yeah. So Absher would be a guard for us in that scenario, and Jagasol would be a tackle. But at the same time, that's where I would start them both. The first day of fall camp, I'm starting them both out of tackle. That's the thing I would say and then see who's more comfortable. I wouldn't immediately move. I'm not immediately moving Sullivan Absher to guard, because here's the big unknown. I've never seen the kid pass set.
I know.
Like, literally, I've never seen him take a college type of pass set ever. He may do it, and you're like, oh, put him at guard now. Move him now. Don't ever let him play another snap at tackle. He may also do it, and you're like, wow, that was smooth. We just don't know. We've only ever seen him go vertical. And that is sort of the one thing I'm kind of hung up on Sullivan Absher, Ryan, when it comes to ranking him higher, is it's hard for me to rank him higher, even though I love the size. I love a lot of those different things, but I just can't jump him up too high because I've never seen him take a real pass set.
That's fair.
Right. And so, but if he can do that, then I could easily see him. So that's a lot of where my guard projection comes from, is because I can project what he's going to need to do at guard. And then the pass set thing isn't as bad because you don't have, it's a different animal than playing tackle. But I would definitely start them both off. That would definitely start them both off at tackle and see who's the most comfortable, and then move it that way. Whoever's the best guy there is how I would kind of go with that one.
Not the same exact situation, Brian, but it's also just kind of like how the college game is played now, where like so much is RPO dictated, and you're just like, can I ever see an offensive tackle do a 45 or a vertical set
Right.
ever? Like, it never happens. Everything's a jump set or just a play action. It's so
Right.
frustrating.
Right. Absolutely. John A1 says, glad to see Paige pick the Irish. If he maintained his athleticism along with his current reported size, how does he compare to Monroe Freeling?
I think Freeling has a little more upside because I just think he's a little better of an athlete. Not a ton, but I think he's a little better of an athlete. I think the length is pretty similar. I think they both project to being left tackles, but I just think that Freeling is a slightly better athlete than Paige.
I will say this I think that if he is the 6'7", 300 pounds and maintains athleticism, then he then becomes what Monroe Freeling is now.
That's fair.
And the reason I say that is because that's a good thing. That kind of my whole top 100 guy, because we think Monroe Freeling's really good. So if Elijah Paige maintains the athleticism we saw in film at 6'7", 304, 305 with a little bit more pop, then he becomes Monroe Freeling.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, but I still, like you said, I think the upside for Monroe Freeling is there. I think Monroe Freeling also has a little bit more heaviness in his hands than Elijah has.
A little more pop.
A little bit more. So like if Elijah's who I think he is, I'd probably, I project him like, if the athleticism stays and all the other things stay, but the size fills out, he is a 75 to 90 national player, right? Like that's a jump. Monroe Freeling now is a top 50 guy now.
Mm-hmm.
So it would take some regression. But the point is they're both really good football players. The upsides for both is enormous. It's kind of like, it's like the argument we're having now. Who's the better player, Joe Alt or Blake Fisher? Well, they're both really good players. I'd probably go with Blake Fisher, for this reason. Somebody else may go with Joe Alt for this reason. The reality is it's kind of like, who was better, the 80s Celtics or the 80s Lakers? Well, I'll take either, right? Like, take either. Fired. Ryan's gone. He's out. He's done. Ryan's out. No, I'm kidding. But the point is you're talking about two really good entities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like one's good and one's not good. You're talking about two strong aspects of it is the point. John A1 also says, is it hard to judge the 24 offensive line class at this point? I would imagine the 24 class will have some top talent after their junior years are played out. Our offensive tackles that rare to just take 6. I think that is to me, offensive line is always the hardest group to evaluate younger dudes.
Yeah.
Because what you find is you'll find guys like Peter Jones and just the guys are already big and strong. What you don't know is, are they going to keep growing? And which could potentially mean they slow down and get stiff, or do they stop growing, which means that's as good as they're going to get. I've said this before. I remember when Josh Myers was a sophomore in high school. I was like, this is one of the best high school offensive tackles I've ever seen. And then, but he kept getting bigger, but he got stiff as his body matured. He got stiff. Guys' bodies change differently. And so you don't know how it's going to develop the next couple of years. And then you see guys that are as sophomores were 225 pounds, Joe Alt, who just, their bodies develop at a different time. So I think it's very hard to evaluate sophomore film for offensive linemen. Very hard to evaluate then project it. I think it's more so about, for me, when I look at 24 and saying, hey, maybe I'd be okay taking 3 next year or not going past 4, because again, 10 in 2 years is pretty comfortable. Not going past 4 next year. It's not so much about 24's not a good O-line class. It's not it's not a super deep offensive line class from what I've seen so far. But again, it's way too, because there's some 240-pound kid who's going to be 280 in 2 years, and that people are going to look at him. Exactly. There's some 250-pound kid who's going to be 275 as a junior, and he's going to be a better player. That's how it goes. It's more about, I just don't see them being better than, finding. I mean, you just don't often see guys that are better than a Jagasaw, a Paige, and especially a Monroe Freeling. Yeah. Right. So it's like, yeah, okay. It's not, there could be guys like them next year, but I know these guys are good now. And so I'll take them. And then next year I can really then focus on smaller numbers and go for elite talent.
Right.
And I think that would be the advantage to it in this particular instance. Again, I don't think you can do that every year, because then all you're saying is you're bringing 6, knowing that 2 or 3 of them are going to transfer every year. And I don't think that's a healthy thing to do, in my opinion. I love this super chat from Alan Watson. Thank you, Alan. He says, future forecast for South Bend, sunny with a downpour of commitments. That's very well done. That's a much better joke than the one we heard in this chat a couple minutes ago. So,
Which one was that?
we're on the same Elijah Paige. And Brian Panicchio with a super chat, $5. Thank you very, 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 very much for that. Jay Henry asks, is Freeling better than Caden Proctor?
They're completely different players. Is Monroe Freeling a better left tackle potentially than Caden Proctor? Absolutely. Yes. I think Proctor could be a really good right tackle, and I think he could be a dominant guard, like very, very good guard. Maybe the best guard in college football in a couple years. Like, I think he has that type of upside at the position. I think he could be a really good right tackle too. I think in a power-based system, he could stick at left tackle, but I don't think that's the best spot for him. I really don't. So I think Monroe Freeling is a better pure left tackle prospect than Caden Proctor. Proctor might have a higher upside at a different position, but then you're getting into the conversation of what's more important, a right guard or a left tackle, right? So there's a little bit of a compromise that needs to happen there. So at one position, yes, I think Monroe Freeling is better than Caden Proctor, but Proctor is a more versatile player. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does. I will say this, my only thing, I've actually seen Caden Proctor in person. And my question would be is, as a quarterback, I don't know if I would want him playing in front of me at guard. He's extremely tall. Like, that would be my only thing. It'd be my only concern. And he's not a great bender. That would be the other thing. Like, so that would be my only, but it works for Josh Lugg. That would be my only somewhat question mark is if this kid grows much more, he may outgrow the potential of moving inside the guard. But again, you put him in.
He's a pure right tackle then?
I think he's a pure right tackle. Yeah. And a really good one. Really good one. And I see the attributes that you see at guard, Ryan. I'm not disagreeing with that. He's skill set of
he's a farm boy, man.
Right. Boy. I mean, his calves literally are this big around. I mean, he's huge. And this was last April when I saw him. He was going into his sophomore or his junior year, right? So I can imagine what it looks like now. So that would be my only. I agree with everything you said, skill set wise. It just the height is the only thing that would make me kind of give some pause about him potentially being that. What's wrong? Somebody asked you if there was alcohol in your drink?
No. Someone said I need a Celsius sponsorship, and I was making sure that it wasn't. It's True North. It's not okay. Celsius. There you go.
That looks like it. All right. Let's see here. Some more questions from everybody. We appreciate the super chats and the questions. I like this comment. This isn't a question. This is more of a comment from Big Jim. If Monroe Freeling is a better left tackle than Elijah Paige, then Freeling is silly good. Well, yeah, he is. I think you nailed it, Jim. You nailed it. He is really, really, really good. It ain't rocket science. The tag team of Bayless and Heastan has never been seen before. I would venture to guess that by the time that our Irish play at Texas A&M, this Notre Dame O-line will be pushing those five-star Aggie D line around a good bit. You're actually wrong about that.
It was a year, right?
We have seen them together before, and they won the Joe Moore Award and produced 2 top 10 NFL draft picks that year. So in seriousness, Matt Bayless arrived in 2017. That was Harry Heastan's last year. So we saw them together for a year, and it was a heck of an offensive line. And if not for Alex Bars getting his knee torn up, you would have had Tommy Kramer. Here's the thing: Tommy Kramer is starting games in the NFL right now with all the injuries he's had. I mean, they were injuries away from 4 of those 5 guys being drafted. And technically, if you want to count Robert Hainsey as a starter on that team, because he's kind of a co-starter, then it would have been 4 anyway, because Robert was a 3rd round draft pick. But it was that's what I say is 2 of the guys ended up going. 3 of the 4 or 5 starters ended up going undrafted for different reasons, and they won the Joe Moore Award, and they were excellent. And I went back and looked at the numbers and kind of broke down every game that year, Ryan. They averaged 5.9 yards per carry to the right side. And that's how good that offensive line was.
It's pretty good. It's not bad.
Yeah. Your bad side, you're averaging almost six yards a carry. So it's pretty good. It's pretty
Must
good.
Be nice.
But
Must be
we
nice.
did see that group combo together, and it was excellent.
Brief,
which backs up your point. The point from the question of that duo together, gives Notre Dame a chance to have something really, really, really special. Matt Lee asks us, so adding a center at Notre Dame, that is the potential position. That is the position they're recruiting him to play. Now, obviously, anytime you recruit a kid to play a position on the offensive line, there's a chance. I mean, if a guy can play center, you think he can at least be a guard. He's a guard in high school. if a guy can be a right tackle, you think that he could probably move to guards. I mean, there's always some versatility, but the position there, they view him as the center. I mean, like just clearly the center in that class. So very, very good question. David Lowe says, how many wide receivers does Notre Dame have committed? They have one public commitment. Let's let that hang for a second. Coleman Smith, how many recruits do you think will commit this weekend? Sean on the Lucky Lefty podcast said that there could be up to 3 more commitments this weekend. I don't know if we'll see 3 more commitments this weekend publicly.
Right.
Simply because a lot of these guys have visits coming up. A lot of these guys will do what Elijah Paige did and do what Joe Otting did, which is commit, but not down, right away. So
Exactly.
if we're going to say how many guys are going to commit this weekend, I would be shocked if it's 3 commitments this weekend if we're only including public commitments. But if we're talking about silent commitments, I think there'll be at least 3. There could be at least 3 this weekend. And so, I mean, there's as I kind of think through it, there's definitely a couple defensive players that I could see going silent this weekend. And there's definitely 2 offensive players that I could see going silent this weekend as well.
Everybody, Brian said that there's going to be 3 this weekend. Put it somewhere. What? Just kidding.
No, see, there you go. There you go. Yep,
I'm the comedic element on here, Brian. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna have to work on that.
We do.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. We're gonna have to work on that. Definitely not what I paid you for.
Oh man.
I'm kidding. Mr. Hewtown says USC moved in front of us in the 23 team rankings. Depending on what site you look at, does this put us back in front? So first of all, the site that has Notre Dame behind USC is On3. Their ranking system is stupid. USC has 7 commitments. They're number 1. Alabama's number 3 with 4 commitments.
Doesn't make any sense.
It's just as silly as when you look at the others and Texas Tech is number 2 and Cincinnati's number 4 and Northwestern's number 6 because they have so many commits. So I don't put a lot of stock in it. So here's how you know the Notre Dame's class is excellent. When you look at the rivals top 10, okay, they have USC 10th. That's too low. On3 has them number 1. That's too high. There is a very high quality to their commit list, right? But the number 2 team is a 3.2 average star rating. Notre Dame is a 4.0 because Notre Dame does not have a single 3-star. Well, they have 1 3-star commitment in their class on rivals, but then the 5-star commitment in the Keon Keeley balances it out. Cincinnati's 3.1, Ohio State's 3.9, Northwestern's 3.1, Penn State's 3.6, Arkansas's 3.3, Tennessee's 3.7, Louisville's 3.3, and then not until you get to USC, who's 4.3, do you have anyone that can match that? So it's the best class in the country right now. And I don't care what On3 Sports says. On3 Sports also thinks that Devin Brown was the best player in the country last year. So I don't really put a lot of stock in what they also don't think Dante Moore is a top 40 player. So yeah. I don't put a lot of stock in what On3's ranking system. And even though there are some that are really good for Notre Dame, if Notre Dame lands Charles Jagusah, that's phenomenal for Notre Dame from a ranking standpoint because they have as the number 7 player in the country.
Sure.
But I love Charles Jagusah. Right now, he's not the number 7 player in the country. Could he eventually be that? Sure. If he plays for Harry Hiestand for 4 or 5 years, he could be a top 10 NFL draft pick. But he's not that guy right now, is the point. So I don't put a lot of stock in what they have to say. David Lowe says, does anyone know why Rivals dropped Braylon James 130 spots? Other than they're just not good at this rankings thing, that would be my only response. I'm not trying to take shots, but the reality is they have some very silly stuff that they do.
It's so weird though, isn't it? I mean, because you're looking at like a 6'2.5", 6'3" wide receiver that has tested in the 4.4s with a 38-inch vert and hasn't done anything this offseason to justify that drop. I just don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense other than he's going to Notre Dame. I mean, that could really be the only thing that you can come up with. Right.
I'm with you. I really don't see anything else going on.
I mean, because honestly, we've been talking about this all offseason, but what has Braylon James done this offseason to drop him 130 spots?
Right. Even if he went to a camp and dropped 10 balls, that one camp doesn't change the fact that you watched all the film of him from his junior season. So it just It just, and it'd be like if he shows up and ran like a 5 flat in the 40, like something like that. But we know that's not true because the kid's going to the state championship track meet in 110 meters in Texas.
And
right?
he didn't even run the 110 high since 8th grade, and
Right.
he placed at states.
Right. With a partially, no, that was Tobias Merriweather that did that one state with a partially injured hamstring. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Another guy that Rivals didn't think was, kept dropping him in the rankings. Where did Rivals end up having Tobias Merriweather? I don't believe he was a top 100 recruit. I'm going to look that up again.
I thought it was in the hundreds because I think I went.
But it was
on
like
there at some
he
point.
definitely wasn't in the top 100.
No,
it was my point. They had him kind of 135. Right. So yeah, I don't have to question their evaluations of offensive linemen. 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, Ryan, last year Texas signed 8 offensive linemen. No, I'm sorry, 7. One of them I don't know why Rivals does this. They list long snappers as offensive linemen. So unless they signed a 6 foot, 215-pound offensive lineman, I'm going to assume that's a long snapper. They signed 7 offensive linemen, but again, that was out of need. They had to do that. Notre Dame's only doing that because, they've got some really, really, really good players.
I was actually looking at Texas. I was looking at Texas's projected depth chart on our lads the other day, and I think they literally had 3 projected true freshmen offensive.
I could see that. I could see that. Because I'm looking at it now. I could see maybe Kelvin Banks starting. I could definitely see Devin Campbell starting. Malik Agbo maybe. Maybe he could start as a freshman. They got some kid. Their size of. Here's the size of their offensive line signees: 6'4", 295, 6'5", 315, 6'5", 320, 6'6", 370. It's a little too big.
Wow.
6'5", 295, 6'6", 320, 6'4", 310. So the point is, if you're going to have offensive linemen, they're going to come into play as freshmen. Ideally, you want to have a scenario in which some of those guys are just naturally big, that they can overcome deficiencies of maybe grown man strength since they're 18, or ideal technique because they're 18 and freshmen, with just, I can throw my weight around a little bit. Most freshmen aren't Robert Hainsey with like impeccable technique the minute they step foot on campus, right? Sure. Most of these kids need to learn that. But the good thing too is with the kids at Texas is you've got one of the best line coaches in the country at Texas in Kyle Flood. I think he is. I think he's one of the 5 best offensive line coaches in college football.
Yeah.
And I thought that was to me, that was the best hire that Steve Sarkisian made. With all due respect to the receivers coach they hired, who does a really nice job. He's hired some good coaches. It's like Harry Heastand. It's the equivalent of bringing back Harry Heastand for Texas. You bring in one of the best recruiters and developers of offensive linemen in the country. Because at the end of the day, Ryan, developing linemen is the number one selling point as a recruiter at that position more than any other, in my opinion.
Agree. And they have to protect the greatest quarterback recruit of all time. So.
Wow. You were just on fire with the sarcasm today.
That's what 24/7 Sports.
He had a perfect score. Greatest score ever. You can't have a better score than what Quinn Ewers had, which is
that's what 247 told me, man.
Absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd. I'm sure it had nothing to do with hype at all. And
or the mullet. Yeah.
Correct. Absurd. Mike Huff. It's just with a super chat. Thank you, Mike. It's just ridiculous now. We left Walmart to shop down Fifth Avenue. What a class. I love that comment. Now, the one thing I will say is I get what you're saying, but Notre Dame has signed some pretty good players, right? Like they have signed some pretty good players. I would argue that Brian Kelly didn't get the most out of the players they got, but there were also recruiting deficiencies. So I love the pettiness. The shots that we're taking at Brian Kelly. Those are all fun because then it's not me doing it because everybody gets mad at me. Like, you talk about Brian Kelly too much. Well, I didn't bring it up. Somebody else did. But I also think sometimes we got to make sure that they did bring in some really good players. And he would often not maximize those players, which was an issue too. And sometimes they won in spite of him. Like, Mike Elko wasn't shopping down Brian Kelly's aisle. Right, Chip Long wasn't shopping down that aisle, and Marcus Freeman wasn't shopping down that aisle either. So, we'll have to see. John Bingham, thank you for the question, John. How many players do you see Notre Dame taking in the 23 cycle? Last year, A&M and Georgia took 30, so I'm curious to see how many Notre Dame would be willing to take. I think they're going to go over 25 for sure. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to envision them going past 27 just because you don't have to worry about the 25 number anymore. That's gone, but you still have to worry about the 85. And that's still a thing. The 85 is still a thing that hasn't gone anywhere. Now, I still think that they screwed that up because with all these kids that are taking 6 years, and you should have slowly worked back to 85. You should have gone from unlimited to like 95 in 2021, 90 in 2022, and then maybe, something like that should have been when they did it. But, at CNCA, they don't think about rational things. They just say, hey, let's give blanket extra years to everybody and then not address the potential problem that's going to come up in 2 years when all these kids want 6 years and they don't have enough kids to play. And then all these high school kids are left without scholarships. Let's not worry about that right now. We'll address it when it comes because we're the NCAA and we're stupid. Sorry, couldn't help myself. Jeff Fluke says, do you think the lack of a development receiver has hurt the development recruiting at DB? Iron sharpens iron, right? Thoughts on that, Ryan? I think so.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, right? I mean, I think there's something to be said about wanting to face, and it's a very cliche thing, but you want to try to play the best players every day in practice, right? So that when you get on the field in a real game situation, it's kind of easy, right? Well, easier, I should say. So I think that hurts. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a couple positions. You talked about wide receiver. You talked about defensive back. There's been spurts of good recruiting, but the development has not been consistent, right? So I think so. Yeah, I think that those two kind of go hand in hand. It's same thing with if Notre Dame wasn't offensive line right there for a while under Coach Heastan, do they recruit defensive line quite as well as they were at certain points? I would argue it's kind of the same thing. It's a reciprocal type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Got some more down here. Jay Henry, any updates with Braylon James?
Jaden Greathouse.
Jaden Greathouse. I was reading another thing that somebody said that Braylon James is the best receiver Notre Dame has signed since Will Fuller. So I was reading that as well. And no, I do not sound like Joe Rogan. That's another thing in the chat. I do not sound like Joe Rogan.
That's funny. So Jaden Greathouse is scheduled to.
I'll take his money. I'll take some of the money he makes. I'll take the Spotify deal.
But I don't sound like Joe Rogan. Yeah. I just want a little bit of it. So Greathouse. Greathouse is scheduled to visit Notre Dame next weekend, the 17th through the 19th. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame is in a really good spot with him. We talked about it the last time they visited for the Blue and Gold game. They hit it out of the park. They are the leader for Jaden Greathouse now. It's about closing, and I think they have an opportunity to close during that visit.
And getting him last is important. Yep. I believe he visited Texas the last weekend of May. Mm-hmm. And then between last weekend and this weekend, he's going to be at South Carolina and Oklahoma in one order. I forget the order of those two, but it'll be at South Carolina and Oklahoma. And then, of course, Notre Dame. That's his 4 finalists: Texas, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Notre Dame. So I agree with Ryan. It's about closing, but Notre Dame is in a really good position. There's no question. Yep. There's no question about it. I think that is all the questions we're going to answer, or that we have, I should say. Let's see here. And now everyone's saying that I do sound like Joe Rogan. I don't think I've listened to Joe Rogan. I don't sound like Joe Rogan. And Ryan is killing it. He absolutely is crushing it. No doubt. No doubt. Let me see if there's any more. Let me just scroll through here and see if there's any more questions here real quick.
I don't think you sound like Joe Rogan.
Thank you.
Just to put that out there.
But you would say whatever you thought made me happy. You've been sucking up a lot today, it's not just sucking up. You know that I'm having a really crappy day, and you're just trying to make me feel better, which I really appreciate it.
I'm an optimist, man. I'm here to make everyone feel good.
I appreciate it very, very much. Very, very much. All right, I think that is going to do it for all of the questions. And
can I ask a question? Can I throw a question?
Of course, yeah, of course.
Would you rather sound like Joe Rogan or Mel Kiper?
Well, I mean, one dude doesn't like smoke pot nonstop and sound, you know what I mean? But no, I think of the two, I'd rather probably sound like Mel Kiper. I enjoy Joe Rogan, but like he's just an every day kind of guy. You know, his language is a little coarse, and I mean, I enjoy Joe Rogan. I don't think it's an insult to sound like Joe Rogan. I just don't think I sound like him. So I enjoy. He's one of the few people that will bring in all different types of voices and people from different fields. And I don't sit there talk about like UFOs and whatnot, the JFK conspiracy and whatnot, but I rather enjoy Joe Rogan. I just don't think I sound like him. I think you kind of get upset when people say you sound like Mel Kiper, like as if it's like an insult or something like that. Yeah, it's like
So I just started thinking about that meme where he just starts going, Todd.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You don't sound like Frank Caliendo version of Mel Kiper. You sound like the real Mel Kiper, not the spoof Mel Kiper. So yeah, there you go. Just to remind everybody, we will have a show tomorrow. Sean Davis and I plan on going tomorrow. So unless something comes up, that is when Randy Scheller says, I think you sound like Brian Driscoll. Amen, Randy. Amen.
He got the 2 L's in Driscoll.
It's all good. It's all good. Don't mind it. Don't mind. That's the one you notice. You don't notice the first name. You notice that one. So the Saturday show tomorrow, the RTCB show or CF show will be back tomorrow. Sean and I have got some topics. It'll be fun for that. Monday, Ryan and I will be back for a recruiting hour at 1:00. We'll wrap up this weekend's events. We'll have that. And then Monday night, this upcoming Monday. So Ryan, what will it be? The 13th of June. We're going to launch the IB Nation Sports Talk Show at 6:00 Eastern. It's going to go every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And is going to have Sean Stiers as the host for that show. He's going to kind of take his own form. I've allowed Sean to kind of come up with the format he likes. So he's going to kind of share his thoughts on things. He's going to bring guests on at times. He's going to have a daily rapid fire where he brings a guest on and they just talk quickly, give thoughts on a lot of different topics. It's going to be good. It's going to be similar to the format he did when he was at WSBT Sports Beat, which I thought, the job he did at WSBT Sports Beat is why I wanted to hire him. So, it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll obviously Notre Dame football is going to be our number one priority. But with that show, the reason we went with Sports Talk is because we want to be able to have the freedom to talk about other things. If he wants to talk about the basketball team, people have asked, hey, you're going to talk about the basketball team, the hockey, the baseball team, other different aspects of University of Notre Dame. That's just not me. That's not like I'm a football guy, right? And so, but Sean has done play-by-play for the baseball team. He is currently the women's basketball play-by-play guy. So I feel like he brings such a different aspect of it. And then sometimes we may talk about college football as a whole. We may talk about other sports topics. So we want to keep it a little bit more broad, knowing that Notre Dame football is still at the heart of who we are. But that allows us then on this channel to strictly stick to football. Like this is a football and recruiting show. But now Irish Breakdown as an entity is going to branch out with a little different style because there are people that like talking about other sports and different things like that. So we will have that now. So it's going to be a great show. Tune in definitely Monday night at 6:00 Eastern. It's going to be a lot of fun. And of course, we're also going to change up if you listen to the podcast. So if you're listening this via podcast, so not listening to the live show, or if you are listening to the live show, but then you also listen to the podcast, we're going to change up how that gets produced as well. So like right now, we'll do this podcast. I'll cut it up, edit it, and I'll publish it in the morning. That's what we do for like our 1:00 show. Well, now what we're going to do is when we finish the 1 p.m. shows, I'm going to immediately cut those up, edit them, and then put them out on the podcast right then. So it's a little bit more, right after we do the show. And then the morning show, so normally we release stuff at like 6 and 9. What we'll then we'll have Sean's come out in the morning. So if you're a podcast listener, Sean's show, it's going to be an hour. It's not going to be like a Q&A at the end. It's just going to be like about an hour-long show, some maybe a little bit more, some a little less. But it's going to be a different kind of show. You can still do super chats and there'll be some engagement, but it's not going to be like the Q&A that we do. We'll put that up in the morning. So if you're a podcast listener, we're going to change up the times. We're actually going to have some stuff come out in the afternoon now. So on your 5:00 drive home, you're going to at least have one show most likely every day that will be fresh. It'll be from that day, not I'm now downloading the morning thing, which was actually yesterday afternoon show. So just so you all know, that's going to be a little bit of a change to our podcast schedule. I think it's going to work now that we've got the second show every day. So I'm super excited about that. Mailbag's not going away. The Saturday show's not going away. The afternoon shows are going to stay the same, but we're just adding to it. And that's always the goal. So anyway, for Brian, that's Ryan. Thank Vince for being with us earlier. Of course, Elijah Paige for being on the show. Commitment number 15 for Notre Dame. Everybody have a great rest of your Friday night. We will see you again tomorrow on the Irish Breakdown podcast.